Another moment you've been waiting for. He's the guy you've probably seen somewhere as a VJ, on TV, in films, on the stage, or on an OTT show. From introducing stand-up comedy to the Indian middle class and inspiring the young generation to dreams of taking up comedy as a career, to creating history this week. Well, I can't say he's finally landed because Veer Das has been around for a while, keeping it funny and real for his audience, be it in India or abroad. This week, though, Veer Das bagged the first Emmy for India for his Netflix stand-up special, Veer Das Landing. And in his own words, it's the first award for India in comedy, but not the last. And we've got the man himself with us. Veer Das, such a pleasure talking to you. And let me start by saying big congratulations from all of us.
Thank you so much, sir. It's very good to see you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Veer, so let's start with the Emmy. Now, you have been nominated once before, so this time, were you nervous? Were you biting your fingers? Were you fairly confident you would get it?
I wasn't nervous at all because I didn't think I had any shot of winning. I'd been there once before, and it's an interesting category because it lets a smaller show like myself punch above its weight. So because they consider laughter to be laughter, I'm nominated with Dairy Girls. I'm nominated with massive fictional productions that take 100 people to make and cost way more money than my show costs. I'm just a guy sitting on a stool, and maybe 8 people worked on my show. So I'd been there before, and I wouldn't say I lost, but Call My Agent, which was a massive global show at that time, had won. And then this year I was nominated with something called Dairy Girls, which is just as equally a massive Netflix global hit. And so I was just enjoying myself. There was bread at the table, and I was drinking some wine. And then for Best Comedy, he said there's 2 envelopes and the jury has reached a tie. And that's the first time I thought maybe I have a shot. And then the name got announced. So and the rest, I think the next 90 seconds are very much a blur because I kind of ran up on stage, and then I got off and just went into panic mode saying, I hope did I thank my wife? Did I thank Netflix? Did I thank the Academy? Once I was told I had hit all 3, then I was fine. So yeah, I was very relaxed until I won, and then I wasn't relaxed at all.
So when did it start to really strike you? I believe you took a picture next to a dishwasher. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, I graduated from college, I think 2002, and I used to work in the kitchen of a restaurant called Grand Lux Cafe in Chicago, and I was also a banquet waiter. So those are the 2 jobs I was doing to pay for rent while I was waiting for hopefully a real job to come my way. And I was a dishwasher. You learn quite a bit being a dishwasher, and it's a decent job with good people. And my manager, Reg, as we were walking, you have to walk through the kitchen to get through the fancy press area, which is where, the media waits for you. And I was still a little bit shaky, and he's like, let's take a breath. And he said, by the way, you remember you were a dishwasher, right? And you're standing next to a dishwashing station. So this is the photograph that you should take before the press takes photographs of you. So in a zone, I kind of took that photograph, yeah.
And if I look at your social media reactions after the Emmy, it sounded as if you teared up the most when you actually saw an Amul ad about you. Perhaps that's the most defining moment for any Indian. You don't really know you've arrived in India when Amul makes an ad about you.
Yeah, I think that was it for me, to be very honest with you. I think like you always, no matter what you do, you crave your parents' love. And so I think the same would go for your country, perhaps. And for me, yes, I spent the first 8-9 years of my life abroad. And yes, I did study abroad. And that's always kind of come up in a conversation of how Indian I am or how Indian my comedy is, etc. But I tend to carry India across the world with me, as I literally did for this show Landing. So if you're a 90s kid, to have Amul mention you is not something you foresee in your future ever. So yeah, that's the one where I teared up, to be very honest.
So let me ask you, how much of India do you actually carry around with you? It's interesting to know there are people of Indian origin who are starting to make an impact in the world of comedy. Been doing it for a while. Russell Peters, for example, Hassan Minhaj comes to mind. Your shows, the things that you're doing, How global is it? How Indian is it? How are you trying to find the balance?
Um, Strangely enough, because of the advent of the Netflixes and the YouTubes of the world, you now have to be more authentic. And you have to be more authentically Indian, not just for an Indian audience, but for an American audience or a Norwegian audience. Earlier, everybody has their palatable, local, consumable version of Indian culture, and there's an artist who represents that. I.e., a Russell Peters in Canada, or a Hassan Minaj in America, or a Sanjeev Bhaskar in the UK, and they'll represent the five things that represent the Indian diaspora, or that that country knows about them. But I get to show up with the sixth thing and the seventh thing that you may not have known about India. And now people kind of expect that after Netflix, because they're like, you need to take me someplace new because I've already got a guy for the five things that I already know. And then if you show up at my show, if you show up at Carnegie Hall, there's 3,000 people, 1,500 are Indians. Some of them haven't been in a room with this many Indians in a decade. It's this sort of reunion with them in their country. And for some of them, I'm their catch up, their annual catch up on what's going on. So it is very Indian, the entire experience.
That's a really fascinating theme, and perhaps when you take the food example, there used to be a time when there used to be a certain type of an Indian food that would be provided across the planet. It used to be somewhat diaspora linked from South Asia, but now many people are getting a taste of authentic food from India, and they are starting to expect that. Is that sort of what you're trying to get at? That's what you're offering to people, and it's working not just with the Indians and the Indian diaspora, but also with people who've got no connection with India at all.
Yeah, for sure. I get to talk about, DPS in Dubai and like Noida in Norway. And it takes 3 extra seconds, during which the Indian audience is very patient. I remember I had a bit in my last world tour about the Andheriya Mode ki Chudail. Now, that is an absurd thing to talk to 28 countries about, right? But I think first, the Indians in the audience are excited to see how you will solve that creative puzzle and explain A, Andheriya Mode, and B, the concept of the witch to their local audience. And B, the local audience wants something new. They want to taste something new and go somewhere new. When I watch a Dave Chappelle show, he takes me to Ohio. I've never been interested in Ohio particularly. I got interested because of Dave Chappelle. So why the hell can't I take you back to Mumbai or Bandra, as it were?
Veer, when people used to talk about comedy becoming a breakthrough in the West, people said, maybe you'd be able to do it in films and in other areas, maybe music. But I used to hear people saying that comedy will never break out from India because you've got to be plugged into the local culture. Your jokes have to resonate with the audience out there. There's never been you'll never be a successful comedian in America because you will not know enough about the Chicago experience or the New York experience or the Baltimore experience to be able to land a joke. Now, you're saying that in this new global culture, you don't need to do that anymore.
Not at all. And ironically, I have more freedom to talk about America than an American comedian does. In America specifically as a country, comedy is very attached to identity and ideology. So depending on who you are, where you're from, and how you grew up, and maybe how you vote, that dictates the kind of comedy that you watch. I get to show up as a blatant outsider, with no agenda but friendship and sometimes edge. And therefore, I get to show you a broad mirror. I get to show the entire country back to you, which oftentimes a local comedian who's maybe not alpha male or maybe not woke or maybe, I don't have to play by any of those rules. I kind of get to show the entire thing back to you.
But let's just talk about the rules for comedy in general, because obviously with social media, we're now in an era where we also seem to have lost a little bit of our funny bone. There used to be a time when we wrote and took a lot of pride in laughing at ourselves as much as anything else. But has that become tough to do? I mean, how does anyone get used to living with the idea of cracking with jokes when there are 500 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 people saying, no, this offends me, this offends my sensibilities, you can't joke about this?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, that's a tough thing, and it's something that both sides have to adapt to. But on the flip side, do you know what you had to do to reach 22 million people 15 years ago, and how quickly social media does that for you now? So if you're going to take the upside, you got to take the downside, is how I always look at it, right? I'd rather be a young comedian now than I would 10 years ago, believe me, because the chances of you finding income, audience exposure are 700 times higher. Something we're adapting to is earlier it was, here are my jokes, see you, I'm off to the next city. And if you didn't like them, too bad. Now the audience has a voice, and the audience is a very large voice. And it's a very large voice when it's good, and it's a very large voice when it's bad, and it can follow you along. So both sides are kind of adapting to that. I think comedians are learning to understand that, oh, it's now a conversation with the audience as opposed to I've moved on. And I think audiences are adapting to the fact that you need to give comedians time and permission to be imperfect. What I always say is, when you hear a song, it is the mixed mastered version of that song. When you watch a movie, it is the edited, colored, graded version of that movie. Chances are when you see a joke, sometimes it's midway, before it winds up on Netflix. If you catch a joke live, or if you catch a joke in a snippet, or like a, give it time, it'll get there.
But staying with people getting offended, look at the staple of stand-up comedy, right? All through the last few decades, you quite often joke about identity, right? When you say anybody in this room from Poland, or somebody in this room from Mexico, and then you sort of make fun of them, crack a joke, poke fun of them. In these politically correct days, is any of that still possible? Is it still permissible? Is it okay? Can you get away with that?
You have to have more than a first thought joke if you're going to go on regionality. So if you're going to say anybody from Punjab in the room, anybody from Poland in the room, it better not be what everybody's thinking. That's important. You got to go beyond that. Um, Accents have to be done carefully as well. I think, for instance, Trevor Noah does a really good job with, doing a plethora of world accents, but going beyond the first thought, and not quite linking an accent to a stereotype, just doing it for the bit or for plot. What I often tell people, when I do an accent, if I do a Russian accent, or if I do an American accent, is, listen, you had about 20 years of fun with my Indian accent. All of you did it. So why don't you give me about 10 years with yours, and then we'll have this conversation. You know what I mean? You had a really good time with the Indian accent there for a while.
Naveed, you're no stranger to controversy yourself. No one is these days. There's always that storm that is only one joke or one remark away. Is this a time where you started now telling yourself, okay, I may have to self-censor myself a little. Let me not go there or crack that particular joke, because, oh my God, you don't know what will happen next if I was to actually say that.
I'm too blessed in that my audience is too wide to know what to self-censor. If you come to my show, there's different age groups, different leanings, different sexual orientations, different religions. I don't know who to self-censor for. It's like a big joint family at dinner, and if you try and cook the bhindi according to a way, and all of them, you're going to drive yourself insane, and perhaps it won't be a great dish. What I do know is, it's my job to walk up to the line, and you, the audience, move the line every 5 minutes. You're in charge of where the line is. You let me know, and I'll learn from you. That's how I approach it.
When you say, I will do this for a while, what is this? Is it comedy? Is it films? Is it stage shows, Netflix shows, all of the above, VJing? I mean, where are you headed to?
I just ended up creating a show that I starred in. In February, I'll go on floor with my first feature that I'm co-directing, and that I'll also star in. And that's a sort of a Hindi action comedy. And I've never been in one of those before. I have an American sitcom in development, which hopefully I'll get to be in as well. And I'm somehow going to have to go to 33 countries this year. So I'm trying to balance it all out. But like I said, I've been building an engine, and that engine is an audience. And I haven't driven the car yet. That's how I feel. So it's finally in the garage. I've tinkered with it a lot, and now it's time to test drive and go,
Well, you're not just tinkering with it, I can assure you. I mean, take a look at your calendar, looking at what you're doing. I guess it's far better to be too busy than to be less busy.
What I always tell my wife is, I've worked very hard to be this exhausted,
And I think that's probably true. What is going to be the defining moment, you think, of your career? This Emmy, or is it going to be the moment when you are going to present the Academy Awards at some stage?
So it depends on which career you're talking about. I think if you're talking about the acting career, I'm hoping this will definitely help with certain things. If I walk onto stage and I put an Emmy down on stage in an atmosphere where the audience has gotten babysitters and driven miles and waited for months and spent good money, it's going to make my life far more difficult than it will easier. When you come to my show, the promise is that I give you 600%. I make you forget about your problems and you go home feeling like the star. So, that's what it's going to still be about.
But the ultimate goal for you, what would that be? Academy Awards or something else? I mean, when I look at you, I say that's going to happen someday.
I would not deny that opportunity. I'm going to be honest, but there are certain venues in the world I'd love to play. I'd love to do Madison Square Garden one day. That would be a nice milestone. I'd love to do the O2 Arena someday. That would be a nice milestone. I don't know. So there is no plan. If there was a plan, one wouldn't have continued doing stand-up. One would be something else.
All right, Veer. Well, keep doing whatever you're doing, because obviously it's working really well. And once again, many congratulations from all of us. Thank you so much for joining us on The India Story. And that's all we have for you this week on The India Story. But we'll be back again next week, taking a look at the assembly elections results are going to be just around the corner next week. So we will take a close look at that and also the rest of the big headlines coming out of India. Do remember to tune in. Bye for now.